willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
Okay, so just a few things off the bat before we get into this. I picked this game up a year or two after release, and it goes on sale constantly for around $6. At that price, I highly recommend getting this title, but I'm not here to give this game any objective review or final score or anything like that. I just wanted to try my hand at video game essays because it looked like it was a lot of fun. I also have not played Doom Eternal because of the aforementioned $6 sale it will inevitably go on, and also I am a clown that should not be listened to. So please keep in mind that this is my first go at this kind of video, or any kind of video, and I would really appreciate any feedback that you can give me. Let's get started. I'll admit that the original Doom is way before my time. My first encounter with the game was on an Xbox 360 with the digital port and a few leftover credits to spend. At that point I had already played a ton of modern first-person shooters and found the game to be fun, if not a little tedious. Identical rooms with hidden key cards, invisible switches that led to secrets I did not care about. My 13-year-old brain did not last very long. But for some reason I have always been drawn to Doom, right down to its four-letter iconic title, Doom. Everything it represents. As much as I enjoy a good story, Doom could not care less. The harsh metal soundtrack at incredible speed screams the mantra. No thinking, no decisions, just rip and tear. It's with this ideology you also see Doom aiming to be fun over realistic. Off the bat, there's no reloading, more weapons than you could ever need, and by the end of the game, you're double jumping with full mid-air control. These are decisions that are only in support of what feels good versus what makes sense. It's the kind of knowledge acquired through years of design and development in the 3D shooter world. Of course, I wouldn't want to make any statements without qualifying them, so let's go through the actual story beats of the game and see exactly what I'm talking about here, and I'm going to try my best to not spoil anything. The game starts with a voiceover narration as a rune is revealed. This is a perfect example of the writing style Doom follows. Of course, you can uncover the story of the symbol and what it means to the Doom Slayer, why you begin the story chained to a slab, and why you wake up when you do, but the Doom Slayer does not care about any of these details. He's a blank slate we can project ourselves onto, and if you choose to explore the lore, the index is there, but this rune can also just be a cool symbol to kick off the game. Both of these playstyles are correct. In the beginning, we see the game kick off as fast as possible. Here are the bad guys. You're going to be the worst guy. Slam the zombie, grab the gun. After dispatching a few of the fodder enemies, Doom reveals a clever way to explain the backstory non-invasively with the blue holograms. These are reflections of the past within the same place that they happened, showing the intent and eventual catastrophe without taking the player out of the moment with a cutscene or a text log or whatever. And right as the game begins to get into the characters, plot, and all that other nerd stuff, the Doomslayer completely ignores it. This is a perfect example of the optional nature of the story. You can always access the codex, the holograms, or the narration stones, but none of these represent the spirit of the game. If we take a step back and think about the development cycle this game went through, you can also see the stark contrast this has from Doom 3 to its final product. Throughout the entire development, you see that initially they were going for something much more narrative-driven, a Call of Doomy. In the end, it's nice to see that even with that extreme development time and doubt from the general fanbase, a voice of reason came through and truly understood the spirit of the Doom franchise. Instead of your average, chest-high, wall-cover, first-person shooter you would see in modern military hardware, I think that Glory Kills is a really good example of the unique display of combat and violence that Doom has. Once you figure out that the normal fodder enemies can just be double tapped with the melee button to begin a glory kill, you start to get an idea of the frantic, fast-paced nature the game has. Early on, you'll stumble onto your first arena. There are two kinds of arenas, one which you stumble upon and then naturally develop an understanding of the layout, which you are rewarded with ammo, health, and armor, and arenas like this one where you have to initiate by pulling the pus pocket out of a flesh barnacle. I know it's called a gore nest. After a while, you begin to understand that this is the natural flow of the game, environmental set pieces that, once the atmosphere is established, we can begin our interaction with, an arena that differing levels of enemies and pickups and secrets. After a few hours, you begin to feel a little tired of constantly revolving through different arenas, but overall you truly get an understanding of how much effort they put into each area, whether it be the environment, the verticality, or the choice of demons you eviscerate. I absolutely love these little dudes, but more importantly, I think the layout is a perfect balance of setting a direct atmosphere while playing, but through exploration you can also find subtly fourth wall breaking secrets and Easter eggs. Never too many to get in the way of the action, but just enough to reward you for traversing through the map. I mean, a quarter of the Praetor suit upgrades are designed to help you explore the map and reveal these different secrets, so you can understand how much effort and love went into these tiny breaks from the action. Alright, I know I'm not breaking any ground by saying the music is amazing. If you know anything about this game, you know that Mick Gordon slammed it out of the park, on account of the fact that you know his name. Seriously, how many composers can you name other than Koji Kondo? If you do any research into the creation of this soundtrack, you will see how dedicated Mick was to nailing the sound. Finding ancient Cold War synths and a pedal board that looks like the HAL 9000 to grab that loud, frantic sound that perfectly envelops the player in the setting. The way the music evolves and morphs with the gameplay is so subversive and suited to you that it feels like you're in a music video that you're improvising. Particularly the BFG division blasting during an arena makes you want to scream with violent satisfaction. I cannot overstate how much I love the environment design in this game. It's a mixture of these off-color, yellow-gray, retro-futuristic space race facilities, usually represented in now mangled terminals and scientists, shout out to Half-Life, and the desert-esque surface of Mars, which admittedly are just vehicles to the next facility section. The real cake-taking part of this environmental design comes in once the Doomslayer arrives in Hell, which I don't think is a spoiler because every Doom game ends up at Hell at some point. But to understand why Hell is such an amazing section, we first need to discuss a not-so-great aspect of the game. Personally, I ended up buying this game 3 times. Once for PS4, another on Steam, and a third time to send to a friend of mine. On 3 separate occasions, I tried and failed to finish this game, all around the Meltdown chapter. This stretch between Meltdown and Hell is the worst part of the game in my opinion. A sour mixture of not having a full arsenal and relying on the same few weapons, and most of it is comprised of platforming, key finding, and maze crawling. I think this section is here mainly as a callback to the original Doom formula, and while I do think it does a great job of making the player feel the scope and weight of the facility, at best you're looking at an hour and a half of slogging through tight corridors and key fetching and climbing until we finally reach the meat of the game. This opening shot is what finally sold the world for me. After all those tight rooms and scurrying around the base, we are teleported to a refreshingly different area. The floating pillars and the foreboding Mount Demon Head fills you with this renewed vigor of the game you're about to play, resting on the giant of the game you've already been playing. It is a little annoying seeing one of those little Doom dudes almost immediately to the right, but I imagine in the realest sense this is the philosophy behind the design. Sell it like the opening of Episode 4, while making sure your tongue is always resting in your cheek. Finally, the game feels like it's opening up, confident in its mechanics and allowing the player to enjoy the brand new weapons they've been collecting. Although we do collect colored skulls now instead of keys, in this case it feels more like it's getting the player to truly flesh out its fleshy environments, and I don't mind that nearly as much. All this makes it so much harder to understand that the Hell portions only make up about a quarter of the game. While it may have the greatest sections and the best feel, it makes it feel so disappointing to leave and have to go back through another facility portion. At this point, I don't really want to talk about the story anymore if there's anybody out there that has not played through this game. I would much rather get into the mechanics and the different functions of the game to kind of talk about what works and what doesn't. Doom uses a quick select wheel, the whole game coming to a crawl in this super slow-mo and letting you choose the new weapon. As much as I like this design, it is annoying that the chainsaw and the BFG are not a part of the cycle. I played on PC and mapped my chainsaw and crouched the off buttons on my mouse, and by the time that I got to having the BFG, I was so used to having crouch as my off button that I didn't want to replace it with the gun. So any use of this almighty weapon always had this twinge of lost immersion as I stumbled to find the key on my keyboard. I know, that's a personal problem, but it's one so easily fixed if this gnarly slow motion wheel would just have an idle option if you didn't select any of the cornered guns. And with the guns, we also run into the token systems. There are two kinds of upgrade tokens acquired throughout the game. Praetor tokens for the suit, and weapon tokens for the weapons. There's also spheres of Argent energy to upgrade your health, armor, and ammo capacity. The suit tokens and the Argent spheres are well balanced, and it feels like they took the correct amount of time between each pickup, but it always feels like you have way too many weapon upgrades. You are pummeled with these for everything you do, from special kill objectives to just regular combat spaces. By the end, you won't even realize that you have a surplus of these and no real preference to where they go. In no way do I think that the gun upgrades are bad. It's extremely satisfying to upgrade your favorite weapons to this unbelievable level of destruction. I just think there's a much better way to go about all of this. Take for example the mastery objectives. Once any given weapon has been fully upgraded, the game asks you to accomplish a certain kill method a handful of times. I think if the weapon upgrades were fully dedicated to this objective-based evolution versus the generic tokens you could spend, it would all tie the progression together in this tighter and seamless way. Outside of the upgrade tokens and the Argent energy, you will find these floating runes. These are mini challenge sections meant to test the player in more obscure ways to reward them with a passive buff to their gameplay experience. I think this is a great addition to the overall mixture, but also presents an issue with strategy. You can use a maximum of 3 runes at one time after a few encounters, but very quickly you'll find that these buffs are not even close to equal. But even with this, it still is better to have these perks than to go without. Overall, I think this game is not perfect, but there's this sort of magic to it. Something about the environments, weapons, movement, pacing, and secrets that culminate to this miracle mixture of an experience. I also think that this game's blind victory has led the way for other titles that invoke this style of old-school shooters to find their own success, like the astonishing Dusk, or really any of the games made by the New Blood team. Eventually, I'll get to playing Eternal, and I will without a doubt talk about that once I do, but there's a part of me that feels fully satisfied with the game format that I just played, and I only hope that more of the same won't start to feel bloated. The game is good. Really good. It leaves you with this happy little headache like driving home from a brutal front row concert. I only hope all of you can live your lives with a sense of doom.